From 1904. The White People. Arthur Machen. Prologue. Sorcery and sanctity, said. There are only realities. Each is an ecstasy, withdrawal from the common life. Cotgrave listened, interested. He had been brought by a friend to this mouldering house, through an old garden to the room where Ambrose, the recluse, dozed and dreamed. Yes, magic is justified of her children. There are many, I think, who eat dry crusts and drink water, with a joy infinitely sharper than anything within the existence of the impractical Epilogue. You're speaking of the saints. Yes, and of the sinners, too. I think you are falling into the very general error of confining the spiritual world to the supremely good. But the supremely wicked necessarily have their portion in it. The merely carnal, sensual man can no more be a great sinner than he can be a great saint. Most of us are just indifferent, mixed-up creatures. We muddle through the world without realizing the meaning and the inner sense of things. Consequently, our wickedness and our goodness are alike second-rate, unimportant. And you think the great sinner, then, will be ascetic, as well as the great saint? Great people of all kinds forsake the imperfect copies to go to the perfect originals. I have no doubt but that many of the very highest among the saints have never done a good action, including the ones in the ordinary sense. And on the other hand, there have been those who have surrounded the very depths of sin, who all their lives have never done an ill deed. He went out of the room for a moment. Cotgrave, in high delight, turned to his friend and thanked him for the introduction. It's grand, he said. We never saw that kind of lunatic before. Ambrose returned with more whiskey and helped the two men. He abused the teetotal sect with ferocity, handled the seltzer and the pouring out of a glass of water for himself. I was about to resume his monologue. Cotgrave I can't stand it, you know, he said. Your paradoxes are too monstrous. Man may be a great sinner, and yet never do anything sinful? Huh. You're quite wrong, said Ambrose. I never make paradoxes. I wish I could. I merely said that a man may have an exquisite taste in Romane e Conte, and yet never have smelt forced ale. That's all. It's more like a truism than a paradox, isn't it? Your surprise at my remark is due to the fact that you haven't realized what sin is. Oh, yes, there's a sort of connection between sin, with a capital letter, and the actions which are commonly called sinful, with murder, theft, adultery, and so forth. Hey, Freedom. Much the same connection that there is between the A, B, and C in fine literature. But I believe that misconception, it's all but universal, arises in great measure from our looking at the matter through the social spectacles. We think that a man who does evil to us and to his neighbors must be very evil. So he is, from a social standpoint. But can't you realize that evil in its essence is a lonely thing, passion of the solitary, individual soul? Really, the average murderer, or a murderer, is not by any means a sinner in the true sense of the word. He is simply a wild beast that we have to get rid of to save our own necks from his knife. I should class him rather with tigers than with sinners. I don't have anyone. It seems a little strange. I think not. The murderer murders not for positive qualities, but for negative ones. It lacks something which non-murderers possess. Evil, of course, is wholly positive. Only in it is the whole rule. You may believe me that sin in its proper sense is very rare. It is probable that there have been far fewer sinners than saints. Yes, your standpoint is all very well for practical social purposes. We are naturally inclined to think that a person who is very disagreeable to us must be a very great sinner. It is very disagreeable to have one's pocket picked. We pronounce the thief to be a very great sinner. In truth, he is merely an undeveloped man. He cannot be a saint, of course, but he may be, and often is, an infinite better creature than thousands who have never broken a single commandment. He is a great nuisance to us, I admit, and we very properly lock him up if we catch him. But between his troublesome and unsocial action and evil, the connection is the weakest. It was getting very late. Probably heard all this before, since he assisted with a bland and judicious smile. But Cotgrave began to think that his lunatic was turning into a sage. Do you know, said, it interests me immensely. You think then that we do not understand the real nature of evil? No, I don't think we do. We overestimate it. We underestimate it. We take the very numerous infractions of our social bylaws, the very necessary, very proper regulations which keep the human company together. And we get frightened at the prevalence of sin and evil. But this is really nonsense. Take theft, for example. Have you any horror at the thought of Robin Hood, of the Highland Terrans of the 17th century, of the Moss Troopers, of the company promoters of our today? Then, on the other hand, we underrate evil. We attach such enormous importance to the sin of meddling in with our pockets and our wives that we've quite forgotten the awfulness of real sin. And what is sin? Said Cotton. I think I must reply to your question with another. What would you feelings be, seriously, if your cat or your dog began to talk to you, and to dispute with you in human accents? Would you be overwhelmed with horror? I can be sure of it. And if the roses in your garden sang a weird song, you would go mad. Suppose the stones in the roads began to swell and grow before your eyes, and if the pebble that you noticed at night had shot out many blossoms in the morning. Well, these examples may give you some notion of what sin is. Look here, said the third man, hitherto placid. You two seem pretty well wound up, but I'm going home. I missed my tram, and I shall have to walk. Ambrose and Cotgrove seemed to settle down profoundly. The pale light. You astonish me, said Cotgrove. I never thought of it. If that is really so, one must turn everything upside down. The essence of sin really is at the taking of heavens by storm, it seems to me, said Ambrose. It appears to me that it is simply an attempt to penetrate into another, into a higher sphere in a forbidden manner. You can understand why it is so rare. There are few indeed who wish to penetrate into other spheres, higher or lower, in ways allowed or forbidden. Men, in the mass, are amply content with life as they find it. Therefore, there are few saints and sinners, in the proper sense, and fewer still. And men of genius, who partake sometimes in each character, are rare also. Yes, on the whole it is, perhaps, harder to be a great sinner than a great saint. There's something profoundly unnatural about sin. Is that what you mean? Exactly. Holiness requires a great, or almost as great, an effort. But holiness works on lines that were natural ones. It is an effort to recover the ecstasy that was before the fall. But sin is an effort to gain the ecstasy and the knowledge that pertain alone to angels. And in making this effort, man becomes a demon. I told you that the mere murderer is not therefore a sinner. That is true. But the sinner is sometimes a murderer. Here's the race, as an instance. You see that while the good and evil are natural to man as he is now, man, the social, civilized being, evil is a natural in much a deeper sense than good. The saint endeavors to recover a gift which he has lost. The sinner tries to obtain something which he has never had. In belief, he repeats the fall. But are you Catholic? Said Cotgrove. Yes, I'm a member of the persecuted Anglican Church. Then how about those texts which seem to reckon a sin as that which you would set down as a mere trivial dereliction? Yes, but in one place the word sorcerers comes in the same sentence, doesn't it? That seems to give a keynote. Consider, can you imagine for a moment that the false statement which saves an innocent man's life is a sin? Very good. Then it is not a mere liar who is to be excluded by those words. It is, above all, the sorcerers who use the material life. Use the failings incidental to material life as instruments to obtain their infinitely wicked ends. And let me tell you this. Our higher senses are so blunted, we are so drenched with materialism, that we should probably fail to recognize real wickedness if we encountered it. But should we experience a certain horror, a terror such as you hinted that we would experience of the rose tree saying, in the mere presence of an evil man? We should if we were natural. Children and women feel this horror you speak of. Even animals experience it. But with most of us, convention and civilization and education have blinded and deafened and obscured the natural reason. Oh, sometimes we may recognize evil by its hatred of the good. One doesn't need much penetration to guess at the influence which is dictated, quite unconsciously, the Blackwood Review of Keats. But this is purely incidental, and as a rule, I suspect the hierarchs of Tophet pass quite unnoticed, or perhaps, in certain cases, as good but mistaken men. But you use the word unconscious just now. It's viewers. Is wickedness ever unconscious? Always. It must be so. It is the holiness and genius that says this other order points. It is certain rapture or ecstasy of the soul, transcendent effort to surpass the ordinary bounds. So, surpassing these, it surpasses also the understanding, the faculty that takes note of which comes before it. Now, a man may be infinitely and horribly wicked and never suspect it. But I tell you, evil in this, its certain and true sense, is rare, and I think it is growing rarer. I'm trying to get a hold of it all, said Cotgrove. What you say, I gather that the true evil differs generically from that which we call evil. Quite so. There is no doubt an analogy between the two, a resemblance such as enables us to use, quite legitimately, such terms as the foot of the mountain and the leg of the table. And sometimes, of course, the two speak, as it were, in the same language. The rough miner or puddler, the untrained, undeveloped tiger man, heated by a quart or two of his usual measure, comes home and kicks his irritating and injudicious wife to death. He is a murderer. Gilles de Reyes was a murderer, but you see the gulf that separates the two. The word, if I may so speak, is accidentally the same in each case, but the meaning is utterly different. It is flagrant Hobson Jobson to confuse you, or rather, if it is one suppose that Juggernaut and the Argonauts had something to do etymology with one another. And no doubt the same weak likeness or analogy runs between all the social sins and the real spiritual sins. In some cases, perhaps the lesser may be schoolmasters to lead one to the greater. From the shadow to reality. If you are anything of a theologian, you will see the importance of all of this. I'm sorry to say, remarked Cotgrove, that I have devoted very little time to theology. Indeed, I've often wondered on what grounds theologians have claimed the title of science of sciences for their favorite study, since theological books I've looked into have always seemed to me to be concerned with the feeble and pious pieties And the kings of Israel and Judah, I do not care to hear about those kings. We must try to avoid theological discussion, he said. I perceive that you would be a bitter disputant, but perhaps the dates of kings have as much to do with theology as the hobnails and murder of brother of evil. And to return to our men subjects, I think that sin is an historic, occult thing. Yes, it is infernal miracle as holiness is the supernatural. Now and then it is raised to such a pitch that we entirely fail to suspect its existence. It is like the note of the great pedal pipes of an organ, which is so deep that we cannot hear it. In other cases it may lead to the lunatic asylum, or to still stranger issues. But you must never confuse it with mere social misdoings. Remember how the apostle, speaking of the other side, distinguishes between charitable actions and charity. As one may give all one's goods to the poor, and yet lack charity, so remember that one may avoid every crime, and yet still be a sinner. Psychology is very strange to me, said Cosgrove. But I confess I like it. I suppose that one might fairly deduce from your premises the conclusion that the real sinner might very possibly strike the observer as a harmless personage enough. Certainly, because true evil has nothing to do with social life or social laws, or if it has, one incidentally and accidentally. It is a lonely passion of the soul, passion of the lonely soul, whichever you like. If, by chance, we understand it, grasp its full significance, then indeed it will fill us with horror and with awe. This emotion is widely distinguished from fear and the disgust with which we regard the ordinary criminal, since the latter is largely or entirely founded on the regard which we have for our own skins or purses. We hate the murderer because we know that we should hate to be murdered, or to have done with one that we liked murdered. So, on the other side, we venerate the saints, but we don't like them as well as we like our friends. Can you persuade yourself that you have enjoyed Sir Paul's company? Do you think that you and I got on with Sir Galahad? So with the sinners as with the saints, if you meet a very human man who recognizes you, would, no doubt. With more. But there is no reason why you should dislike him. On the contrary, it is quite possible that if you could proceed in putting the sin out of your mind, you might find the sinner capital company. And in a little while you might have to reason yourself back into order. Still, how awful it is. The roses and the lilies suddenly sang in the coming morning, if the furniture began to move in procession, as in Demopsis Seance tale. I'm glad you have come back to that comparison, because I wanted to ask you what it is that corresponds in humanity to the imaginary feats of inanimate things. In a word, what is sin? You've given me, I know, an abstract definition, but I should like a concrete example. I told you it is very rare, said Ambrose, who appeared willing to avoid giving an answer. The materialism of the age, which has done a good deal to suppress sanctity, has done perhaps more to suppress evil. We find the earth so very comfortable that we have no inclination either for ascents or descents. It would seem as if scholars desired to specialize in topics. We would be reduced to purely antiquarian researches. No paleontologist could show you a live pterodactyl. And yet I think have specialized, and I believe that your researches have descended to our modern times. You are really interested, I see. Well, I confess that I have dabbled a little, and if you like, I can show you something that bears on the very curious subject we have been discussing. Ambrose took a candle and went away to a far dim corner. Cosgrove saw him open a venerable bureau that stood there. From the secret recess he drew out a parcel, and came back to the window where they had been sitting. Ambrose undid the wrapping of paper and produced a green pocketbook. "You will take care of it," he said. "Don't leave it lying about. It is one of the choice pieces of my collection, and I should very be sorry if you were lost." He fondled the faded bind. "I knew the girl who wrote this," he said. "When you read it, you will see how it illustrates the talk we have just had tonight. There is a sequel, too, but I won't talk of that." "There was an odd article in one of the reviews some months ago," he began again. And he changes the subject. "It is written by a doctor, Dr. Corin, I think by the name. He says that the lady watching her little girl playing in a drawing room window suddenly saw a heavy sash give way and fall of the child's fingers. The lady fainted, I think, but at any rate the doctor was summoned. When he had dressed the child's wounded and maimed fingers, he was summoned to the mother. She was groaning in pain, and found it that she had 3 fingers of her hand, corresponding with those that had been injured on the child's hand, swollen and inflamed. And later, in the doctor's language, a slowing set in." Ambrose still handled delicately. "Well, here it is," he said at last, parting with difficulty from his treasure. "You will bring it back as soon as you have read it," he said, as soon as he went into the garden, faint with the odor of white lilies. There's a broad red band in the east as Cosgrove turned to go. From the high ground where he stood, he saw the awful spectacle of London. The Green Book. Morocco binding of the book was faded, colored and faint, but there were no stains or bruises or marks of usage. The book looked as if it had been brought on a visit to London some 70 or 80 years ago, and had somehow been forgotten except for the lie out of sight. There was an old, delicate, lingering odor of it, such an odor as sometimes haunts an ancient piece of furniture for a century. The end papers inside the binding were oddly decorated with colored patterns and faded gold. It looked small, but the paper was fine, many leaves closely covered with minute, painfully formed pyramids. I found this book in a drawer in the old bureau that stands in the linen. It was a very rainy day. In the afternoon I got a candle and rummaged in the bureau. Nearly all the drawers were full of old dresses, but one of the small ones looked empty. And I found this book hidden right at the back. I wanted a book like this, to write in it. It is full of secrets. There are many great other books of secrets I've written, hidden in a safe place, but I'm going to write here many of the old secrets and some new ones. But there are some I shall not put down at all. I must not write down the real names of the days and months which I found out a year ago, nor the way they make the Epilogue letters, or the Chian language, or the great beautiful circles, nor the vowel names, nor the chief songs. I may write something about these things, but not in the way to do them for particular reasons. I must not go to say who the nymphs are, or the dolls, or the Chino, or what the Vulas mean. These are the most secret secrets. I'm glad that when I remember it. How many wonderful languages I know. Some things that I call the secrets of the secrets of the secrets, that I dare not think of unless I'm quiet. Then I shut my eyes and put my hands over them and whisper the words. I do this at night in my room, in certain woods that I know, but I must not describe them, as they are secrets. Then there are the ceremonies, which are all important, but some of them are delightful times. There are the white ceremonies, green ceremonies, and scarlet ceremonies. The scarlet ceremonies are the best, but there is only one place where they can perform properly. Though here is a very nice imitation which I have done in other places. Besides these, I have the dances, the comedy. I've done the comedy sometimes when others were looking. They didn't understand anything about it. I was very little when I first knew about these things. When I was very small, mother was alive. I can remember remembering things before that. Only it has gotten all confused. But I remember when I was 5 or 6, I heard them talking to me about They were saying how queer I was. How the nurse had called my mother to come and listen to me talking to herself. They were saying words that nobody could understand. I was speaking in Zuri language, but I only remember a few words. It was about little white faces that used to look at me. It was like great. They used to talk to me, learn their language, and talk to them in some great white place. I lived, where the trees and the grass were all white. There were white hills as high up as the moon. I often dreamed of it afterwards, but the faces never went away. But a wonderful thing happened. The nurse was carrying me on her shoulder. There was a field of yellow corn, and I went through it. It was very hot. Then we came to a path in the wood. A tall man came after us and went with us till we came to the place where there was a deep pool. It was very dark and shady. The nurse put me down on the soft moss under a tree and said, "She can't get into the pond right now." So they left me there, and I sat quite still and watched. And out of the water, and out of the wood, came two wonderful white people. They began to play and dance and sing. They were the kind of creamy white like the old ivory figure in the drawing. One was a beautiful lady with kind of dark eyes and a grave face, long black hair. And she smiled with such a sad smile to the other, who laughed and came to her. They played together and danced round and round the pool. They sang a song until I fell asleep. The nurse woke me up when we came back. She was looking something like the lady was. So I told her all about it, and asked her why she looked like it. At first she cried, then she looked very frightened. She put me down on the grass and stared at me. See, she was shaking. Then she said I had been dreaming. Then she made me promise not to say a word about it to anybody. If I did, I should be thrown into a black pit. I was not frightened at all, though the nurse was, and I never forgot it. Because when I shut my eyes, if it was quiet, I could see it again. Very faint, far away, but very splendid. Little bits of the song they sang came into my head. I couldn't sing it. I was 13, nearly 14, when I had a singular adventure, so strange that the day on which it happened is always called the White Day. My mother had been dead for more than a morning. I had lessons, but to let me go out for walks in the afternoon. This afternoon I walked a new way that led me to the country, but I tore my frock getting through some different places with difficulty. That's the way through many bushes, beneath the low branches of trees, up the thorny thickets on the hill, dark woods full of creeping thorns. It was a long, long way. It seemed as if I was going on forever and ever. I had to creep by a place like a tunnel where the brook must have been. But all the water had dried up. The floor was rocky. Bushes had grown overhead till they met, and it was quite dark. I went on through the dark place. It was long. And I came to a hill that I never saw before. It was a dismal thicket full of black twisted boughs. It tore me, and I went through them. And I cried out because I was smarting all over. Then I found that I was climbing, and I went up a long way. But at last the thicket stopped, and I came out crying just under the top of a big bare place, where there were ugly gray stones lying all about in the grass. And there was a little twisted, stunted tree came out from the stone, a snake. I went up, right to the top, a long way. I never saw such big, ugly stones before. They came out of the earth. Some looked as if they'd been rolled to where they were. On and on, as far as I could see, a long, long way. I looked out from it and saw the country, but it was strange. It was winter time, and there were black, terrible woods hanging from the hills all around. It was like seeing a large room hung with black curtains. The shape of the trees seemed quite different from any I'd seen before. I was afraid. And beyond the woods, there were other hills, round and great. I had never seen it yet. It all looked black. Everything had a void. It was so still and quiet. The sky was heavy and gray and sad, like a wicked forest dome deep in. I went into the dreadful rocks. There were hundreds and hundreds of them. Some of them were horrid. See their faces if they could jump out of me at the stone, catch hold of me, and drag me with them back into the rock, so that I'd always be there. And there were other rocks that were like animals, horrible animals, putting out their tongues. Others were like words that I could not say, and others like dead people lying on the grass. I went on among them, though they frightened me, and my heart was full of wicked songs that they put into it. I wanted to make faces and twist myself about the way they did, and I went on and on, a long way until at last I liked the words, and they didn't frighten me anymore. I sang the songs I thought of, songs full of words that must not be spoken or written down. Then I made faces like the faces on the rocks, and I twisted myself like the twisted ones, and I lay down flat on the ground like the dead ones. And I went up to the one that was grinning and put my arms around it. And so I went on through the rocks till I came to the round mountain in the middle. It was higher than a mountain. It was nearly as high as our house. It was like a great basin turned upside down, all smooth and round. One stone, like a post, sticking up at the top. I climbed up the sides, but they were so steep I had to stop, or I should have rolled all the way down again. I should have knocked against the stones at the bottom, or perhaps been killed. But I wanted to get up to the very top of the big round mountain. So I lay flat down on my face, took hold of the grass with my hands, drew myself up by bits. Then I sat down on the stone in the middle. I felt I had come such a long, long way, just as if I were 100 miles from home, or in some other country, in some strange places I'd read about, tales of the genie, or in the Arabian Nights, or as if I'd gone across the sea, far away for years, and I'd found another world that no one had ever seen or heard of. Or as if I'd somehow flown through the sky and fallen on the stars I had read. There was everything dead and cold and gray. There was no air, and the wind doesn't blow. I sat on the stone and looked over, down. It was just as if I was sitting on a tower, middle, because I could see nothing at all but the great rocks all around. I couldn't make out their shapes anymore. I could see them on way. I looked at them, and they seemed as if they had been arranged into patterns, shapes, and figures. I knew they couldn't be, because I'd seen a lot of them coming from the earth, joints of deep rocks below, so I looked again. But I still saw nothing but circles, small circles inside big ones, and domes and spires. They all seemed to go around and round the place where I was sitting. The more I looked, the more I saw a great big ring of rocks, getting bigger and bigger. But I started so long that it felt as if they were moving and turning, like a great wheel. I was turning too. I got quite dizzy, queer at the head, and everything began to be hazy and not clear. And I saw little sparks of blue lights. The stones looked as if they were springing and dancing, twisting as they went around. I was frightened again, and I cried out loud, jumped from the stone I was sitting on, and fell down. But I was so glad they all looked still, and sat down on the top and slid down from the mountain. I danced as I went in a peculiar way the rocks danced, giddy, and I was so glad I could do it quite well, and I danced and danced along and sang extraordinary songs that came into my head. At last I came to the edge of the great flat heaven. There were no rocks. The way went again through the dark thickets. It was just as bad as the other one I went, climbing up, but I didn't mind this one, because I was glad I had seen those singular dances and imitated them. I went down, creeping through the bushes. The tall nettles stung me on the leg and made me burn, but I didn't mind, and I tingled through the burrows and the thorns, but I only laughed and sang. Then I got out of the thicket to approach the mountain, a little secret place like a dark passage that no one ever knows about. because it was so narrow and deep, and the woods were so thick around it. It was a steep bank with trees hanging around it. There the ferns kept green all through the ferns there have a sweet, rich smell that oozes out of the fir trees. There was a little stream of water running down this valley, so small that I could easily step across it. I drank the water with my hand, and it tasted like bright yellow wine. It sparkled and bubbled as it ran down over the beautiful red stones, so that it seemed alive in all the contents. I drank it, and I drank more with my hand, but I couldn't drink enough, so I lay down and bent my head and sucked the water up with my lips. It tasted much better. A ripple would come up to my mouth and give me peace, and I laughed and drank again. Then there was a nymph. The wonderful picture of her who lived in the water and was kissing me. So I bent low down on the water, softly against it, and whispered to the nymph. I felt sure it would not be common water, as I was so glad when I got up. And I danced again and went up and up the valley. When I came to the top, the ground rose up in front of me, tall and steep as a wall. There was nothing but the green wall in the sky. I thought of forever and forever, world without end. And I thought I must have really found the end of the world, because it was like the end of everything. There could be nothing at all beyond, except the void of void, where the light goes when it is put out, and the water goes when the sun takes it away. I began to think how I found the brook and followed it on, through the bushes and thorny thickets, and the dark woods full of creeping thorns. Then I crept under the tunnel under the trees, and climbed a thicket, and seen all the gray rocks, and sat in the middle of them, and they turned around. Then I'd gone through the gray rocks and come down the hill, the stinking thicket. Oh. I wondered how I should come home again, if I could ever find my way, if home was there anymore, or if it had turned and everyone had the gray rocks as the Arabian Nights. So I sat down on the grass, and I thought what I should do next. I was tired, and my feet were hot with walking. As I kept looking about, I saw there was a wonderful wall just under the high, steep wall of grass. All the ground around it was covered with bright moss. There was every kind of moss there, moss like beautiful little ferns, like palm trees, like fir trees, and it was all green as jewelry, and what drops of water hung like it on diamonds. The middle was a great well, deep and shining, so clear that it looked as if I could touch the red sand at the bottom. But it was far below. I stood by it and looked in, as if I were looking in a glass. At the bottom of the well, in the middle of it, the red grains of sand were moving and stirring all the time. And I saw how the water bubbled up, and how the top of it was quite smooth, full and brimming. There was a great well, large like a bath, and with shining, glittering green moss about it. It looked like a great white jewel with the green jewels all around it. My feet were so hot and tired that I took off my boots and stockings, and I let my feet down into the water. The water was soft and cold, and when I got up, I wasn't tired anymore. I felt I must go on farther and farther and see what was on the other side of the wall. I climbed up it very slowly, going sideways all the time. When I got to the top and looked over, it was the queerest country I'd seen, stranger even than the hill of the great rocks. It looked as if earth children had been playing there with their spades. There was all hills and hollows, castles and walls made of earth and covered with grass. There were 2 mounds, big beehives around great columns and salt, and then hollow basins and steep mountains. Seaside, the big guns of the soldiers nearly fell into one of the round hollows. It went way under my feet so suddenly. I ran fast down the side and stood at the bottom and looked up. Strange and solid. There was nothing but the gray, heavy sky and the sides of the hole. Everything else had gone away. The hollow was the whole world. I thought that was... It must be night for the ghost. moving shadows and pale things when the moon shone down at the bottom of the pit. Wind wailed up. They were so strange and so lonely, like a hollow temple of dead heathen gods. They reminded me of a tale my nurse had told me. It was the same nurse that took me into the wood where I saw the beautiful white people. I remembered how the nurse had told me that one story when the wind was beating the trees against the wall, crying and moaning in the nursery chimney. She said there was, somewhere, a hollow pit, just like this one I was standing. Everybody was afraid to go into it, for near it was such a bad place. But once upon a time, there was a poor girl who said she would go into the pit, and everybody tried to stop her, but she would go. And she went down into the pit, and came back laughing, and said there was nothing there at all except green grass and red stones, white stones, and yellow flowers. Soon the people saw she had the most beautiful earrings, and they asked her how she got them. She said her mother was quite poor, but she laughed and said the earrings were not made of emeralds at all, but only of grass. Then one day she wore in her breast the reddest ruby that anyone had ever seen. It was as big as a hen's egg, glowed and sparkled like hot burning coal of fire. And they asked her how she got it. But she laughed and said it was not a ruby at all, but only a red stone. One day she wore around her neck this necklace anyone had ever seen, much finer than the queen's finest. It was made of bright diamonds, hundreds of them. They shone like all the stars of the night in June. So they asked her how she got it, and she and her mother were quite poor. But she laughed and said they were not diamonds at all, but only white stones. One day when she went to the court, she wore the dandy crown of pure angel gold, so they said, and it shone like the sun. It was much more splendid than the crown the king himself was wearing, and in her ears she wore the emeralds, the big ruby brooch on her breast. The great diamond necklace was sparkling on her neck. And the king and queen thought she was some great princess from a long way off, got down from their thrones and went to meet her. But somebody told the king and queen who she was, and that she was quite poor. So the king asked why she wore a crown of gold, and how she got it. As she was quite poor. And she laughed and said it wasn't a gold crown at all, only some yellow flowers she had put in her hair. The king thought it was very strange, and said she should stay at court, and they would see what would happen next. She was so lovely that everybody said that her eyes were greener than the emeralds, and her lips were redder than the ruby, and her hair was whiter than the diamonds, and that her hair was brighter than the gold crown. The king's son said he would marry her, and the king said he might. The bishop married. There was a great supper, and afterwards the king's son went to his wife's room. And just as he held his hand at the door, he saw a tall black man with a dreadful face standing in front of the door. The voice said, "Don't you know, wife, this is mine, wicked wife." Then the king's son fell down on the ground in fits. As they came and tried to get into the room, they couldn't. They hacked at the door with hatchets, and the wood had turned hard as iron. At last everyone ran away, so frightened, screaming, laughing, shrieking, and crying that they came out of the room. Next day they went in, and found there was nothing in the room. Thick black smoke. Smoke taken away. And on the bed there were 2 knots of faded grass and red stones and white stones, and faded yellow flowers. I remembered this tale of nurses while I was standing at the bottom of the deep hollow. It was so strange and so eternal. I felt afraid. I did not see any stones or flowers, but I was afraid of bringing away with any. And I thought I would do a charm they came to my head and keep the black men away. So I stood right in the middle of the hollow. None of these things on me. Some touched my eyes, my lips, and my hair. Peculiar fashion whispered some queer words the nurse taught me to keep bad things away. Then I felt safe, climbed down, and went on through those mounds and hollows and walls, till I came to the end, which was high above all the rest. I could see that all the different shapes of the earth were arranged in patterns, something like the gray rocks, only patterns different. It was getting late and the air was indistinct, but it looked from where I was standing. Something like two great figures were lying in the grass. And I went on, and at last I found a certain book, which is too secret to be described. Nobody knows the passage into it, which I found out in a very curious manner. I seen some little animals running into the wood through it. So I went after the animal by a very narrow, dark way, under thorns and bushes. It was almost dark when I came out to the open place in the middle. There I saw the most wonderful sight I'd ever seen. The most wonderful sight I've ever seen, but it was only for a minute, as I ran away directly and crept out of the wood. Ran as fast as I ever could, because I was afraid. What I'd seen was so wonderful and so strange and beautiful. I wanted to get home and think of it. I did not know what might happen if I stayed in the wood. I was hot all over, trembling, and my heart was beating, and strange cries that I could not help came from me when I ran through the wood. I was glad that the great white man had come and showed me the way. So I went back through the mountains and hollows and down this valley, thicket over the place with the great rocks. So at last I got home again. My father was busy in his study, and the servants had not told about me, though they were frightened and wondered what I thought to do. So I told them I had lost my way, and I let them. I went to bed and lay awake all through the night, thinking of what I had seen. When I came out of the narrow way, it looked all shining. It seemed so certain, and all the way home I was quite sure I had seen it, and I wanted to be alone in my room, to be glad it was all over. I shut my eyes to pretend it was there. Do all the things I would have done if I had not been so afraid. When I shut my eyes, the sight would not come. I began to think about my adventures all over again. I was afraid it must be a mistake, because it seemed impossible that it could happen. It seemed like one of my nurse's tales, which I didn't really believe in, though I was frightened at the bottom of the hollow, the story she told me when I was little back then. And I wondered whether it was really there that I thought I had seen, or whether any of her tales could have happened a long time ago. It was so clear, I lay awake in my room and back at the house. The moon was shining on all the other side of towards the river. Bright light did not fall on the wall. The house was quite still. I heard my father come upstairs, just after the clock struck 12, after the house was still and empty, if there was anybody alive in it. Now it was all dark and indistinct in my room. A pale glimmering kind of light shone into the light. Once I got up and looked out, there was a great black shadow in the house out in the garden, looking like a prison would never hang, and beyond it was all white. The wood shone white with black gulfs between the trees. Still clear. There were no clouds in the sky. I wanted to think of what I had seen, but I couldn't. I had to think of all the tales that my nurse had told me so long ago. And I thought they all came back, mixed up with the thickets, the gray rocks, the hollows in the earth that seemed old. Though I hardly knew what was new and what was old, or whether it was not at all dreaming. And I remembered the hot summer afternoon, some lady the nurse had left me by himself in the shade. The white people came out of the water, who played and danced and sang. I began to fancy that nurse told me about something. So, and I couldn't recollect exactly what she had told me. Then I wondered whether she had been the white lady. I remembered she was just as white, the same dark eyes and black hair. Sometimes she smiled and looked like a lady at night, when she was telling me some stories. But I thought she couldn't be the lady, and she seemed to have gone a different way. But I didn't think the man who came after us would be the other. I couldn't have seen the wonderful secret of the secret wood. I thought of the moon, but it was afterwards when I was in the middle of the wood. Shaped figures, and ants, walls, mysterious holes, and smooth round mountains. And I saw the great moon come up over them. I was wondering all about these things till at last I got quite frightened because I was afraid something had happened to me. I remembered Nurse's tale, the poor girl who went into the hollow pit and was carried away at last by the rattling. I knew I'd gone into the hollow pit too. Perhaps it was the same. I had done something dreadful. So I did the charm again and touched my eyes, my lips, and my hair. It said the old words from the fairy language, so that I might be sure I had not been carried away. I tried again to see the secret wood, to creep up the passage where I had seen before. Somehow I couldn't. I kept on thinking of the nurse's stories. There's one I remembered about a young man who once upon a time went hunting. All the day and towns hunted everywhere. They crossed rivers and went into the woods. They went around the marshes, but they couldn't find anything at all. And they hunted all day until the sun sank down behind the mountain. The young man was angry because he couldn't find anything, and when he was turning back, just when the sun touched the mountain, he saw out of the break in front of him a beautiful white stag. They cheered to his howls, and they whined but would not follow. He cheered to his horse, but it shivered and stood stock still. The young man jumped off the horse and left the hounds and began following the white stag home. And soon it was quite dark. The sky was black, without a single star shining in it. The stag went away into the darkness. Though the man had brought his gun with him, he never shot the stag, because he wanted to catch it. He was afraid he would lose it in the night. He never lost it once, though the sky was so black and the air was so dark. The stag went on until the young man hit the They all went through the enormous woods where the air was full of whispers, pale dead light came from rotten chunks of the lying on the ground. Just as the man thought he had lost the stag, he would see all the white and shining in front of him. He would run fast to catch it. The stag always ran faster, so he would not catch it. They went through the enormous woods, they swam across rivers, and they waded through the black marshes where the ground bubbled. The air was full of will-o-wisps. The stag fled way down the rocky, narrow valleys, where the air was like the smell of a vault. The man went after it. They went over the great mountains. The man heard the wind come down from the sky. The stag went on. The man went after. At last the sun rose, and the young man found he was in a country he had never seen before. It was a beautiful valley with a bright stream running through it. A great big round hill in the middle. The stag went down the valley towards the hill and seemed to be getting tired, slower and slower. Though the man was tired too, he began to run faster. He was sure he would catch the stag at last. But just as he got to the bottom of the hill, the man reached out his hand to catch the stag. It vanished into the earth. The man began to cry. He was so sorry that he had lost it after all the long hunting. But as he was crying, he saw there was a door in the hill just in front of him. Then it was quite dark. He went on, as he thought he would find the white stag. And all of a sudden it got light. There was the sun shining, birds singing in the trees, and there was a beautiful fountain. By the fountain, the lovely lady was sitting, Fearsome Fairies. And she told the man that she had changed herself into the stag to bring him there because she loved him so much. Then she thought of the great old cup covered with jewels, fairy nuts. She offered him wine. And he drank. The more he drank, the more he longed. So he kissed the lovely lady, and she became his wife, and stayed all the day and all the night in the hill. When he woke, he found he was lying on the ground. He couldn't see the stag. His horse was there, and the hounds were there waiting. When he looked up, the sun sank behind the mountain. And he went home and lived a long time. He never kissed any other lady because he kissed ladies. And he would never drink common wine anymore because he had drunk enchanted wine. And sometimes the nurse told me tales that she had heard from her great-grandmother, who was very old, lived in a cottage on the mountain. Most of these tales were about the hill where people used to meet on nights. They used to play all sorts of strange games and do weird things that nurse told me. But I couldn't understand. Now, she said, everybody but her great-grandmother had forgotten the mountains. Nobody knew where the hill was, not even her great-grandmother. But she told me one very strange story about the hill. That's it. She said the people always went there in the summer, when it was very hot. And they had to dance a good deal. It'd be all dark at first, when the trees were there, which made it very darker. The people would come, one by one, from all directions, by a secret path which nobody else knew. 2 persons would keep the gates. Every one, as they came into the door, gave a very curious sign, which nurse had showed me as she could, but she said she couldn't show me properly. All kinds of people would come. There would be gentlefolk and village folk, some old people, boys and girls, and quite small children. I sat and just watched. And as it would be dark as they came in, in one corner, someone was burning something that smelled strong and sweet. It made them laugh. There would be see glaring coals, great smoke mounting. So they would all come in, and when the last day came, there was no door, so that no one could get in, even if they didn't say anything. Once a gentleman who was a stranger had ridden a long way and lost his path. His horse took him into the very middle of the wild country, where everything was upside down. There was dreadful marshes and great stones everywhere. Holes underfoot, the trees looked like giblet posts, because they had great black arms that stretched out across the way. The strange gentleman was very frightened, and his horse began to shiver all over. The last stops wouldn't go any further. The gentleman got down and tried to lead the horse, but it was all covered with sweat like that. So the gentleman went on all of them, farther and farther and farther. At last he came to a dark place, where he heard shouting and singing and crying, like nothing he had ever heard before. It all sounded quite close to him, but he couldn't get in. So he began to call, and while he was calling, something came behind him. In a minute, his mouth and his arms and his legs were all bound up. He fell into a swoon. When he came to himself, he was lying beside the roadside, just where he had lost his way. The blasted oak with a black trunk. His horse was tied beside him. So he rode to the town and told people there had been happened. And some of them were amazed. So when once everybody had come, there was no door at all for anyone else to pass in. When they were all inside, around a ring, touching each other, someone began to sing in the darkness, and someone else made noise of thunder, singing for purpose. And on the still nights, people would hear thunder noise far, far. Some of them, they used to make a sign on their breast when they woke up. Heard the terrible noise. Thunder noise. And the noise, the singing would go on a long time. People who were in the rings swayed a little to and fro, with the songs of an old Nurse said a great-grandmother had known some of them, remembered a little bit, when she was quite a little girl. Nurse tried to sing some of it to me. It was so strange a tune that it turned cold, my flesh crept as if I put a hand on something dead. Sometimes it was a man that sang, and sometimes it was a woman, and sometimes when he sang it did it so well that 2 or 3 people there felt the crowd shrieking and tearing at their hands. The singing went on, and the people in the ring kept swaying to and fro. The less the moon would rise over the place that they called Cold Blow. Came up and showed them swing and swaying from side to side, with sweet thick smoke curling up from the burning coals, floating in circles all around. Then they had their supper. A boy and a girl brought it to them. They passed the bread and the wine. They tasted quite different from common bread. It changed everybody that tasted them. Then they all rose up and danced. Secret things were brought out from some hiding place, and they played extraordinary games and danced round and round and round in the moonlight. Sometimes people would suddenly disappear. Nobody knew what happened. And they drank more of the curious wine, made images and worshipped. The nurse showed me how the images were made. That's my place where there was a lot of wet clay. Nurse asked me if I would like to know some things that made me yours, and I said yes. Then she asked me if I would promise never to tell a living soul a word about it. If I did, I was to be thrown into the black pit for the day. And I said I wouldn't tell anybody. Same thing, again and again, I promised. So she took a wooden spade and told me to say if anyone met us that I was going to make pies. Then we went on a little into looking. Nurse stopped, looked up and down the room, peeked through the hedge. Then she said, "Quick!" Ran into the break, crept in, bushes. Good wave from the road. We sat down under a bush and wanted to know much about how Nurse was going to make the clay. Before she would begin to make it, she made me promise again not to say a word. She went again and peeped through the bushes on every side. The little lady was so small and mean, would make anybody. So we sat down, and the nurse took out the clay from the bucket and no queer things with it. She turned it around. She hid it under a big dock leaf for minutes. Then she brought it out again. Then she stood up and sat down, and walked around the clay in a cool manner. And all the time she was singing softly, sort of crying. Her face got very red. Then she sat down again, took the clay in her hands, and began to shape it into a doll. Like the dolls I have at home, she made the queerest doll I'd ever seen, all out of the wet clay, and hid it under a bush to get dry and hot. And all the time she was making it, she was singing these rhymes to herself. Her face got redder and redder. So we left the doll there, hidden away in the bushes where nobody would ever find it. A few days later, we went on the same route, again from the narrow, dark lane, right down the bank. Nurse made me promise all over again. Just as she had done before, we crept into the woods. We got to the green place where the play games. I remember it so well, though I was only 8. And it was 8 years ago now that I'm writing it down. The sky was deep violet blue, middle of the break. It's a great elder tree covered in blossoms. On the other side there was a clump of meadowsweet. When I think that day, the smell of the meadowsweet always seemed to me. When my eyes were shut, I could see the glaring blue sky, blue clouds, very white floating across it. The nurse who went so long way along the sitting opposite me, looking at the beautiful white lady. So we sat down and the nurse took out the Play-Doh, the secret place where she'd hidden it. And she said, "We must pay our respects." And she would show me what to do. I must watch her all the time. So she did all sorts of queer things with the little Play-Doh. I noticed she was streaming with her perspiration, though we had walked so slowly and she told me to pay our respects. And I did everything she did because I liked her. It was such an odd game. She said that if one loved very much, the clay man was very good. If one did certain things with it, if one hated very much, it was just as good. Only one had to do different things. We played with it a long time, and pretended all sorts of things. The nurse said her great-grandmother had told her about these images. What we did was no harm at all. One-day game. She told me a story about these images that frightened me so very much. That was what I remember that night. I was lying awake in the pale darkness, thinking of what I had seen in the secret wood. Nurse said once there was a young lady in high gentry who lived in a great castle. She was so beautiful that the gentleman wanted to marry her, because she was the loveliest lady anybody had seen. And she was kind to everybody, and everybody thought she was good. But though she was polite to all the gentlemen who wished to marry her, she put them off and said she couldn't make up her mind, and she wasn't sure she wanted to marry anybody at all. Father was a very great lord and was angry, though he was so fond of her and asked her why she was a bachelor out of all the husbands and handsome young men that came to the castle. But she always said she couldn't love any of them very much, and she must wait. And if they pestered her, she said she would go and be a nun in a nunnery. So all the gentlemen said they would go away and wait for a year. Come back to say who she was going to marry. So the day was appointed, and they all went to work. Promised that in a year and a day, it would be her wedding day. The truth was that she was the queen of the people, and some ill some nights. On the proper nights, she would lock the door of the room. She made seemingly out of the castle, by a secret passage that only they knew. What? And she knew more of the secret things than anybody else. More than one she knew. She would not tell anybody the most secrets. She knew how to do all the awful things, how to destroy young men, how to put a curse on people, other things that I could not understand. The old name was Lady M, but the dancing people called her Casa, which meant somebody very wise in their language. And she was wider than any of them. All her eyes shone like the dark, like burning rubies. She could sing songs that none of the others could sing. And when she sang, they all fell down on their faces and worshipped her. She could do what they called ship, which was wonderful enchantment. She would tell the great lord, her father, that she wanted to go into the woods to gather flowers, so he let her go. She and her maid went into the woods right over the cane. The maid came to watch. Then the lady would lie down under the tree and began to sing a peculiar song. She stretched out her arms. From every part of the great wood, the serpents would come hissing and gliding in the trees, shooting out their forked tongues as they crawled up to them. They all came to her and twisted about her, around her body, to her neck, though she was covered by the serpents. There was only her head to be seen. She whispered to them, and she sang to them, and they writhed around her, faster and faster, until she told them to go. They all went away directly back to their homes, and they expressed their need. An enormous, beautiful sun, shaped something like an egg, cold, dark blue, yellow, red, marked with the serpent scales. It was called a glamestone. With it, one could do all sorts of wonderful things. Nurse said her grandmother had seen a glamestone with her eyes, that it was all shiny and scaly like a snake. The lady could do a lot of things as well, but she was quite fixed that she would never. There were a great many gentlemen who wanted to marry her. There were 5 of them, the chief, and their names were Sir Simon, Sir John, Sir Oliver, Sir Richard, and Sir Robert. All the others believed she spoke the truth, and she would choose one of them to be her man if the day was done. It was only Sir Simon who was very crafty and thought she was asleep. He vowed he would watch and try to find out anything. And though he was very wise, he was very young. He had a smooth, soft face like a girl's. He pretended, as the rest did, that he would not come to the castle for every day. He said he was going away beyond the sea, in warm parts. When he only went a little further, he came back dressed as a servant. So he got a place in the palace to wash the dishes. He waited and he watched and he listened and said nothing. He hid in the dark places. He woke up at night and saw things that he thought very strange. So slyly he told the girl that he wanted the lady, that she was really a young man. That he had dressed up like a girl because he loved her so much and wanted to be in the same house with her. The girl was so pleased that she told him many things. It was more than ever certain that Lady Avalon was deceiving him and the others. So clever, he told the servants so many lies that one night he was behind Lady Avalon. He stayed quiet and still, never moved. At last the lady came. She bent down under the bed and raised up a stone. It was a hole place. Out of it she shook the waxen image, just like the clay one that was in the ring. All the time her eyes were burning like rubies, and she took the little wax doll up in her arms and held it to her breast. She whispered and she took it up and laid it down. She held it high and she held it. Happy was he that begat the bishop that ordered the clerk to the mirror. Had the wife that fashioned the hive, harbored the bee, gathered the wax, that one true love was made. She brought out an amber, great golden bowl. She brought out a great jar of wine. She poured some of the wine into the bowl. Washed it all over. Then she went to a cupboard and took a small round cake. Then she bore it softly and covered it. And Sir Simon, who was watching all the time, though he was terribly frightened, saw the lady bend down and stretch out her arms, and whisper and sing. Then Sir Simon saw beside her a handsome young man who kissed her on the lips, and they drank wine out of the goblet. Then they ate the cake together. When the sun rose, there was only a little wax doll. The lady hid it against her bed. Sir Simon knew quite well what the lady was. He waited and watched, till the time she said she was nearly over. And in a week, year, day was almost done. One night, when he was watching behind the curtains, he saw her making more wax dolls, and she made 5 with the bowl. The next night she took one and filled the gold bowl with water, took the doll by the neck, held her in the water. Sir Dickon, your day is done. You shall be drowned in the water while. And the next day news came to her castle that Sir Richard had been drowned. And at night she took another doll, tied a violet cord around its neck, hung it up. Sir Roland, your life has ended its ban. I'm in a tree. Next day, news came to the castle that Sir Roland had been hanged by robbers. At night, she took another doll and drove the Viking right through its heart. And she said, Sir, no, so cease your life. Your heart is pierced with a knife. Next day, news came to the castle that Sir Oliver fought in the tavern, and the stranger stabbed him in the heart. And at night she took another doll and held it to the fire of charcoal. And she said, Sir John, return and turn to clay. Fire of fever you waste away. And the next day, news came to the castle that Sir John had died. So then Sir Simon went out of the castle and mounted his horse and rode away to the bishop and told him everything. The bishop sent his men and they took Lady Evelyn and everything she had done to her out. So on the day after, he heard the day. They carried her through the town in her smock, tied her at a great stake in the marketplace, and burned her alive after the bishop with the wax image of her. People said the wax man screamed and the bird story again and again as I lay awake in bed, and I seemed to see Lady Evelyn in the marketplace, with yellow flames heating up her beautiful white body. And I thought of it so much that I seemed to get into the story myself, and I fancied that I was the lady that had coming to take me to be burned with fire, with all the people in the town looking at me. And I wondered whether she cared, after the strange things she had done, or whether it hurt very much to be burned at the stake. I tried again and again to forget the nurse's story and to remember the secret. I'd seen that. What was in that secret wood? But I could only see dark, glimmering. Then it went away, and I only saw myself running. Then the great moon came up over the water. And all the stories came back again. Weird rhymes the nurse used to sing to me. One was very beginning. Noisy, clumsy, how it must he. That she used to sing very softly when she wanted to use. So I began to sing it to myself in my head. Next morning I was very tired and sleepy, and I could hardly do my lessons. And I was very glad they were over. had my dinner, and I wanted to go. It was a warm day, and I went to a nice turfy hill by the river and sat down on my old sheet I brought with me for that purpose. The sky was gray like the day before. There was a kind of white gleam on it. From where I was sitting, I could look down to the town. It was so still, quiet, and white like a picture. I remembered that it was on that hill the nurse taught me to play in the town. An old game called Troy Town, which one had to dance, wind in and wind out behind the grass. When one had danced and turned long enough, the other person asks you a question. You can't help answering whether you want to or not. Whatever you are told to do, you feel you have to do it. Nurse said there used to be a lot of games like that in some. And there was one by which people could be turned into anything. An old man, her great-grandfather, had seen known a girl who had been turned into a large snake. There was another very ancient game of dancing and winding and turning, by which you could take a person out of himself and hide him away as long as you liked. His body went walking about quite empty, without any sense in it. But I came to that hill because I wanted to think of what happened there, but the secret of the wood. From the place where I was sitting, I could see it beyond the town, and into the opening. A little brook had led me into the opening. I pretended I was following the brook over again, all the way around in my mind. As if I never crept into it in the bushes. Then I saw the dusk. I saw something that made me feel as if I were filled with fire. As if I wanted to dance and sing and fly up into the air. Because I was changed and wonderful. What I saw was not changed at all. I had not grown old. And I wondered again and again how such things could happen. Whether nurses' stories were really true. Because in the daytime, in the open air, everything seemed quite different from what it was at night. I was frightened. I thought I was being buried alive. I once told my father of the tales which were about a ghost. I asked him if it was true. He told me it was not true at all, and only common, ignorant people believed in such rubbish. He was very angry with the nurse for telling me this story and scolded me. And after that, I promised her I would never whisper a word when she told me. And if I did, I should be bitten by the great black snake that lived in the pool in the wood. And I was all alone on the hill, and I wondered what was true. It said something very amazing and very lovely, and I knew the story. And if I'd really seen it and made it up not out of the dark. A black bow, bright shining, that was mounting up in the sky from a great hill. But had really been done truth. Then there were all kinds of wonderful and lovely and terrible things to think of. So I longed and trembled and I burned and got cold. I looked down to the towns, quiet and still like a little white picture. And I thought over and over if it were true. It was a long time before I could make up my mind to do anything. There was such a strange fluttering at my heart that seemed to whisper to me all the time that I'd pick up in my head. It seemed quite impossible. I knew my father and everybody would say it was dreadfully rubbish. I never dreamed of telling him or anybody else a word of it, because I knew it would be of no use. I should only get laughed at or scolded. So for a long time, I was quiet, without thinking. At night I used to dream of amazing things, and sometimes I woke up in the early morning and held out my arms and cried. I was frightened, too, because there were dangers, and some awful thing would happen to me, unless I took great care, if the story were true. These old tales were always in my head. And I went over them and told them to myself over and over again. I went for walks in the places where the nurse had told me them. And I sat down in the nursery by the fire, the evenings I used to fancy the nurse, sitting in the other chair, telling me some wonderful story in a low voice. Anybody. But she used to tell me about the things that were right out of the country, far from the house, because she said she was telling me such secrets walls had to be. If it was something more than ever secret, we had to hide in bricks or woods. I used to think it was fun creeping along the hedge, going very softly, and then we would be behind the bushes or run into the woods all of a sudden. We were sure that no one was watching us. So we knew that we had secrets quite all to ourselves, and nobody else knew or knew anything about them at all. Now and then, when we had our hit ourselves, as I described, she used to show me all sorts of odd things. One day I remember we were in the wild hazelbrake, overlooking the brook. So smug and warm. Though it were April, the sun was quite hot, and the leaves were just coming out. Nurse said she would show me something funny that would make me laugh. She showed me, said, how one could turn a whole house upside down without anybody being able to find out. The pots and pans would jump about, and the china would be broken, and the chairs would tumble over themselves. I tried it one day in the kitchen and found out quite well. A whole row of plates from the dresser fell off. Cook's little work table tilted, or turned right over before her eyes. As she said, but she was so frightened and turned so white that I didn't do it again, as I liked it. Afterwards, in the hazel copse, she had shown me how to make things tumble about. She showed me how to make wrapping courses. I learned to do that too. And she taught me rhymes to say on certain occasions, particular marks to make on other occasions, and other things that her great-grandmother had taught her when she was living herself. And these things were all that I was thinking about those days after the strange walk I thought I had seen great secrets, and I wished Nurse were there for me to ask about it. She had gone away more than 2 years before, and nobody seemed to know what had become of her, where she had gone. But I shall always remember those days if I live quite old, because all the time I felt so strange, wondering and doubting and feeling quite sure at one time, making up my mind that I would feel quite sure that things couldn't really happen, began all over again. But I took great care not to do certain things that might be dangerous, so I waited and wondered for a long time. I was unsure if I ever at all dared to try to find out. One day I became sure that our nurse was quite sad. One day I became sure all the nurse said was quite true. And I was all alone when I found it out. I trembled all over with joy and terror. As fast as I could run, I ran to the old breaks where we used to go. It was the one by the lake where the nurse made the little playpen. I ran into it. I crept into it. When I came to the place where the odor was, I covered up my face with my hands. I lay there for 2 hours without moving, whispering to myself delicious, terrible things and saying words over and over again. It was all true, and wonderful, and splendid. I remembered the story. I thought of what I had really seen. I got hot, and I got cold. The air seemed full of scent and flowers and singing. First, I wanted to make a little plain man, like the one the nurse had made so long. I had invented plans and stratagems to look about, to think of things beforehand, because nobody must dream of anything I was going to do. I was too old to carry clay around in tin buckets. At last, I thought of a plan. I brought wet clay to the break and did everything the nurse had done, only I made a much finer image than the one she had made. When it was finished, I did everything that I could imagine, and much more than she did, because there was likeness of something far better. A few days later, when I had done my lessons early, I went for the second time by the way of the little brook that led me into a strange country. And I followed the brook, went through the bushes, beneath the low branches of the tree, up thorny thickets on the hill, by dark woods full of creeping thorns, a long, long way. Then I crept through the dark tunnel where the brook had been. Still, it's like a thicket climbed up there. For the leaves were coming upon the trees, everything looked almost as black as it was the first day I had went there. I think it was just the same. I went up slowly till I came to the big bare hill. I began to walk along. I saw the terrible vorg and everything, though the sky was brighter. The wild hills was around still dark. The hay woods looked dark and dreadful. The strange rocks were as gray as ever. When I looked down on them from the great mountains sticking on the stone, I saw their amazing circles and rounds. I had to sit quite still and watch them as they began to turn about me. Each stone danced in place, and they seemed to go around and round in a great whirl, as if one were in the middle of the stars. I heard them rushing through the air. So I went down among the rocks to dance with them, to sing extraordinary songs. And I went down through the other thickets, and drank from the bright stream, close in the secret valley, putting my lips down to the bubbling water. And I went on, I came to the deep, brimming well with the burning rocks. I sat down and looked before me in the secret darkness of the valley. I rocks. All around me was the hanging woods that made the valley such a secret place. I knew there was nobody here at all besides myself. Nobody could see me. So I took off my boots and stockings and I let my feet down, saying the words that I knew. It was not cold at all, as I expected. It was very pleasant. And when my feet were in it, I felt as if they were in silk, as if the nymph were kissing along. So when I had done, I went to the other words and made the signs, and then I dried my feet with the towel I had brought on that day. I put on my stockings and boots. And I climbed up the steep wall and went to the place where there are homes, 3 beautiful mountains, round ridges, with all the strange shapes. I did not go down into the hollow this time, but I turned at the end, and made out the figures quite plainly. It was lighter, and I remembered the story I had quite forgotten. And then the story of the 2 figures are called out. Only those who know the story understand. So I went on and on until I came to the secret wood which must not be described, and I kept to the way that I had found. When I had gone halfway, I stopped. Made quite sure that I could not see at all. Not a twig, nor the end of a roof, nor the light of the sky, as it was an old red silk handkerchief, large yellow spots that went twice and covered my eyes so that I could see nothing. Then I began to go on, step by step, very slow. My heart beat faster and faster, and something rose in my throat that choked me, made me want to cry out, but I shut my lips and went on. Flowers caught my hair as I went, great thorns tore me. I went on to the end of the path. Then I stopped and held out my arms and bowed. And I went round the first time, feeling with my hands. There was nothing. The second time, feeling with my hands. There was nothing. Then I went round the third time, feeling with my hands. The story was all true. I wish that the years would gone by. That it was not so long a time to wait before it was happened. Nurse must have been a prophet like those were reading. Everything that she said began to come true, and since then other things that she told me have happened. That is how I came to know her stories were true, that I had not made up the secret myself out of my own head. But there was another thing that happened that day. The second time to the secret place, it was down at Brimming Well. When I was standing at the moss, I bent over and looked in. Then I knew who the white lady was that I had seen come out of the water. And I trembled because that told me other things. Then I remembered how sometimes after I'd seen the white people in the wood, the nurse asked me more about them, and I told them all over again. And she listened and said nothing for a long, long time, and at last she said, "I'll see her again." So I understood what happened, what has to happen. And I understood about the nymphs, and how I might meet them in all kinds of places, and they would always help me, and I must always look for them. Find them in all sorts of strange shapes and appearances. And without the nymphs, I could have never found the secret. Without them, none of the other things would happen. Nurse had told me all about them long ago. She called them by another name, and I did not know what she meant. The tales about, only that they were quite clear. There are 2 kinds, the bright and the dark. Both were very lovely and very wonderful. Some people only saw one kind, and some only the other. Some saw them both. Usually the dark appeared first, the bright ones came afterwards. There were extraordinary tales about them. It was a day or 2 after I had come home from a secret place that I first really knew the nymphs. Nurse had shown me how to call them, and I had tried, but I did not know what she meant, so I thought it was all nonsense. But I made up my mind I would try again, so I went to the woods where the pool was. Where I saw the white people, I tried again. Dirt and Falana again. Epilogue. That's a very queer story, said Cotton. Seems to drift a good deal, but there are many things I did not grasp at all. On the last page, for example, what does she mean by nymphs? Oh, I think there are references throughout the manuscript to certain processes which have been handed down by tradition from age to age. Some of these processes are just beginning to come within the purview of science, which has arrived at them, or rather at the steps which lead them, by quite different paths. I have interpreted the references to nymphs as a reference to one of these processes. And there are such things? Oh, I think so. Yes, I believe I could give you convincing evidence to that. I'm afraid you've neglected the study of alchemy. It's a pity, for the symbolism at all events is very beautiful. Moreover, if you are acquainted with certain books on the subject, I could recall to your mind phrases which might explain a good deal of the manuscript that you have been reading. Yes, but I want to know whether you seriously think that there is any foundation of fact in these fancies. It is not at all a department of poetry, a curious stream by which man has indulged himself. I can only say that there is no doubt better than for a great mass of people to dismiss it all as a dream. But if you ask my veritable belief, that goes quite the other way. No, I should not say belief, but rather knowledge. I may tell you that I have known cases in which men have stumbled quite accidents onto these processes, and have been astonished by wholly unexpected results. In the cases I am thinking of, there could be no possibility of suggestion, of subconscious action of any kind. One might as well suppose a schoolboy suggesting the existence of Isosceles to himself. Well, he floods mechanically through the delusions. Notice the obscurity. In this particular case, it must be dictated by instinct, since the writer never thought that her manuscript should fall into other hands. But the practice is universal, for the most excellent reasons. Powerful and sovereign medicines, which are, by necessity, violent poisons also, are kept in a locked cabinet. A child may find the key by chance, drink herself dead, but in most cases the research is educational. The file contains precious elixirs for him who had patently fashioned the key for himself. You do not care to go into details? No, frankly I do not. No, you must remain unconvinced. But you saw how the manuscript illustrates the talk we had last week. Is this girl still alive? No, I was one of those who found her. I knew her father well. He was a lawyer, and he always left her very much to herself. Thought of nothing but deeds and leases. News came to him as an awful surprise. She was missing one morning. I suppose it was about a year after she had written what you have read. The servants were called, and they told things, and put only natural interpretation to them, perfectly erroneous ones. They discovered the green book somewhere in her room, and I found her in the place that she described with so much dread, lying on the ground before the image. It was an image. Yes, it was hidden by the thorns and the thick undergrowth that had surrounded it. It was a wild, lonely country, but you know what it's like by her description, though of course you'll understand that the colors had been heightened. A child's imagination always takes the heights higher and the depths deeper than they really are, and she had, unfortunately for herself, something of an imagination. One might say, perhaps, that the picture in her mind, which was succeeded in the measure in putting into words, was a strange scene that had appeared to an imaginative artist. But it is a strange, desolate land. And she was dead. Yes, she had poisoned herself. Time. No, there was not a word to be said against her in an ordinary sense. You may recollect a story I told you the other night about the lady who saw her child's fingers crushed by a window. Was this a statue? Well, it was a Roman workmanship. Its stone that was of centuries had not blackened, but had become white and luminous. A thicket had grown up about it, concealing it. In the Middle Ages, the followers of a very old tradition had known how to use it for their own purposes. In fact, it had been incorporated into the monstrous mythology of the Sabbath. You will notice that those who have a sight for the shining whiteness had been vouchsafed by chance, or rather, perhaps an apparent chance, or were required to blindfold themselves on their second approach. That was very significant. And is it still there? I sent for tools and we hammered it into the dust and fragments. The persistence of tradition never surprises me. I named many an English parish where such traditions the girl had listened to in her childhood still existent in a cold and unabated vigor. No, for me, it is a story, not deceit, which is strange and awful. For I have always believed that wonder is in the soul.